celebrating 17 years of possibility. Pilot Flying J and Halloran Hilton Hill present Anything is Possible. Today's guest, Tom Satkowiak, Part 1.
This is Anything is Possible. I'm Halloran Hilton Hill. This season, I want to remind you of one thing. If there's something you're supposed to do it. It's possible, but you have to go do it. Tom Satkowiak is at the table today. Welcome to the broadcast, Assistant Athletic Director for Communications, and you normally are on the other side of this stuff.
Yes, absolutely.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Let's start at the beginning of your life. Where are you from?
Grew up in Michigan, mid-Michigan, and grew up there and went to high school there and didn't come to Knoxville until it was time to come to college. And after 2 years of community college, I wanted something different, and I wanted to just kind of get away and landed in Knoxville.
So what made you choose Knoxville?
Well, they had a good PR program, and that was what I was interested in, public relations. And like I said, I had gone to 2 years of community college to save money because I knew I couldn't afford 4 years at a four-year school.
Which community college was this?
Delta College. So I had kind of finished up my 2 years there and had applied to Michigan State, but I almost felt like that would be high school all over again, a lot of the same folks, and I just wanted to, I just had an urge to try something different, to just do something, kind of get out of my comfort zone. And
what kind of kid were you?
Played sports.
What'd you play?
I played tennis, basketball, football, played, most sports growing up. And it's funny, I always knew that I wanted to get into athletic communications. Like we would go, we'd play outside, play football all day long, and then I'd come inside at night when the streetlights came on and go down in the basement on a typewriter and write up a story about what we had just done.
Really?
And so I've always thought it was odd that I kind of had this urge. Like I always knew what I was going to do. Didn't know exactly where or, in what capacity, but I knew that I was interested in writing about sports.
Quick story, when I was about 7 or 8, my parents gave me a little tape recorder. And when things would happen in the neighborhood in Milwaukee, let's say there was a good fight, I would cover the fight and then come back on my porch and make a report about the victim and the victor. So I feel
Very
you on
similar.
that. So you're at UT, you come to UT, and what happens then?
Well, I get connected with our sports information office and was blessed to meet Bud Ford and became a student assistant in the office and got to work with the men's tennis program for a couple of years. And when I finished up my undergrad, was blessed to get a graduate assistant position, which was a huge, huge blessing in my life because there is, again, no way that I could have afforded to get a master's degree on my own. So that was taken care of, and worked with the baseball team during the 2005 season, and the team ended up going to the College World Series. The team had 4 big leaguers. At the time, I didn't appreciate the talent and the greatness on that team. I was just kind of trying to survive, get through grad school, and get through that season. But afterward, there was really nothing that a college baseball season could throw at me that I hadn't experienced. And someone left our staff, and I got hired full-time. Did baseball for 3 more years, and then another staff member left, and dominoes kept falling for me at the right times, and I was able to start working with our men's basketball program, and have been doing that ever since.
You keep mentioning, I could not afford. Are you suggesting that you were poor?
I never felt poor. My parents were divorced, and growing up, I lived with my dad and my great aunt, who was his aunt, and that was just kind of mom to me. My mom was Aunt Boots. And so I always had, I'd come home from school, and there was always dinner would be made. I'd have my breakfast made for me every morning. So I never, maybe we didn't have a ton of money, but I never did feel poor. I wouldn't change anything.
Who gave you, though, this desire to keep showing up and to keep trying?
It's funny. I think about this often. There's a lot of friends from where I grew up that maybe went down the wrong path or got in trouble, and life didn't turn out maybe the way they had envisioned. And I always thought to myself, why did I succeed? And a big part of it was that I'd never wanted to disappoint my Aunt Boots. It was just this fear I had. And so I wanted to do well in school. I didn't want to disappoint her.
Is she still alive?
She is.
What was it about her that made you so connected to her and her expectations of and for you?
I don't know how to answer that. she was just, a very just rock solid Christian woman. And, I think there was always an awareness that she wasn't my mom, but she acted like it. And she kind of took on those responsibilities. And I don't know what it is. It just, there's this, like I said, I just couldn't, I wanted to make her proud.
Wow. Let's get a break. My guest is Tom Satkowiak. He is the Assistant Athletic Director for Communications at the University of Tennessee. More in just a moment.
Possibility powered by Pilot Flying J, Covenant Health, Home Federal, and the Knoxville News Sentinel. Coming up.
It wasn't something, that I would go and tell colleagues at work, or, I never wanted to be viewed as the sick guy. So it wasn't something that I talked about very often.
Let's get back to Aunt Boots. I grew up watching Andy Griffith, so I understand the Aunt B connection. When I asked you about her, because you said I never wanted to let her down. How old is she now?
Boy, she was born in 1924, so she's, 90 plus.
She means a lot to you.
Yes.
Kind of talk to me about what she means to you and how she became fuel for your journey.
There was just, like I said, my parents got divorced when I was 4, I believe. And so at that time, my dad and I moved back to his hometown, Bay City, Michigan. And we lived with my grandparents, and they had a 2-story house, and the top story was basically an apartment that my Aunt Boots and my Aunt Marie lived in, and those were my grandma's 2 sisters. And eventually my grandmother passed away from cancer. My grandfather eventually passed away, and it ended up to a situation where my dad and I were just living with Aunt Boots because my Aunt Marie had also passed away. Aunt Boots was the youngest of, I want to say, maybe 9 or 10 children. And so we just found ourselves in this scenario where that was kind of our family. It was me, my dad, and my dad was he had some restaurants for a while, and then that didn't work out, and so he got into real estate. And so he would work and be gone during the day, but he was always very present. When I was playing sports growing up, he was always in attendance. I don't know if he ever missed an event of one of my games or matches. But while he was at work, Aunt Boots was always at home. She was always making sure that I had what I needed for school. Like I said, meals every single day. There was never a question.
Could she cook?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, made some killer cabbage rolls. In fact, I've got some of her recipes still, and my wife will every once in a while surprise me with one of those Aunt Boots recipes. So that's big time. But yeah, she was just, she had worked in a auto foundry. Her whole, she retired from an auto foundry, an auto worker, just a hardworking, just a rock solid person.
There's certain people in your life that I call metronomes. People who practice piano or any instrument will set up the metronome, and it's like tick, tick, tick. And you learn your timing by them. You learn the rhythm of life by them. It's steady. And it feels like she had that effect on you, that steady
absolutely.
effect. Now, where's your mom in this story?
I didn't know my mom. And, after my parents got divorced, I was 4 years old and didn't know where she was or what she was doing. And the day that I turned 18, I got a piece of registered mail at the house, and it was from my mom. And she let me know I married an engineer, an auto engineer. And when the Saturn plant started in Spring Hill, Tennessee, we moved to Tennessee, and I've set up this mutual fund for you, and I want to now turn it over to you. And so my dad encouraged me. He said, you really ought to get to know, because at first I was like, where's she been the last 13 years? Right. I don't, now she's trying to get in my life. I don't need this. And my dad encouraged me. He said, no, you need to, get to know her. And we tried for a couple of years to have a relationship, and to be honest, it was more about her wanting to give me things or give me money. When I was dating Brooke, who's now my wife, I had, informed my mom, I think Brooke's the one. I think I'm going to marry her. Would love for you to be there. And she had explained how I had 4 older half brothers that I didn't know, but I guess she was she didn't attend their weddings, and she felt like it wouldn't be fair. I'm not going to come to your wedding because I didn't go to any of their weddings. And I was thinking to myself, well, there probably wasn't a 13-year gap in their lives where you weren't there. Maybe this would kind of clear the ledger a little bit. But anyhow, it didn't work out. The place that I was in my life, that wasn't what I needed. And I just didn't see it being a really, really healthy relationship. So we kind of had this couple of years, when I was in college, where we sort of tried to have a relationship, but it just didn't work out. And so we haven't spoken in several years.
Now, you were having health challenges because as we're walking through your story, you get to UT and it's that hard work thing. It's like if you keep showing up, when somebody doesn't show up, you move up one, and then somebody doesn't show up and you move up two. It's that hard work. It's that Aunt Boots. It's your dad. It's the factory life. You learn that you go to work, you take your lunch, you do your job, kind of. So you keep showing up, and good things keep showing up in your life as you do that. But, as we're kind of working through your story, you mentioned, you mean my health. So I guess these health issues start to emerge as you're in school.
Yes.
What happened?
Well, at first, I started having some GI issues, and I probably let it go for about 6 months. When you're 20 years old, you feel like you're invincible. There's nothing, this will pass. And so I was having these GI issues, and after about 6 months, I finally said something to my dad. I said, I think something's going on. And so I ended up going to see a doctor, and they diagnosed me with ulcerative colitis, and that can be managed.
What is that?
An inflammation of the bowels, and so that can be managed with medication. And so I was prescribed medication, and sure enough, it helped, and it was kind of keeping it managed, and it wasn't anything that would sort of affect my ability to do my job, or my normal routine wasn't really interrupted. And through the course of diagnosing me with the colitis, they realized that I had some odd elevated liver enzymes, and the doctors locally weren't really able to pinpoint exactly what was going on with my liver. So they sent me to see a specialist at the University of Michigan. And he ordered a procedure called an ERCP, where they kind of go down your throat and are able to kind of assess what's happening. And after that procedure, I'll never forget, we were in a room with the doctor and my dad and myself, and he told me, you've got a liver disease called primary sclerosing cholangitis. There is no cure. There really is no treatment to stop the effect of the disease. And eventually the outcome would be that you would need to have a liver transplant. So I was, 20 years old when I got that diagnosis. And it's jarring to hear that, but at that time, my liver was still functioning pretty well. And so I was able to do normal things. I was able to play sports and continue to work. And it didn't, like I said, it didn't affect my routine. And my liver continued to function very well for maybe close to a decade. And it's really only been about the past 7 years where my liver health and liver function has really started to decline. And so that's kind of that story in a nutshell.
So you've got this diagnosis. The liver that you have, it's not going to be working. Bro, this is done. It may not feel like it's done. It's done.
But you don't know how long.
And you don't know how long.
Be 2 years, 10 years, 15 years. You really don't know what you're working with. And at this time, I was in community college at this time, so I had not come to Tennessee. And I feel like that diagnosis helped me make the decision, why not go and try something different? Why not go down to Tennessee where I don't know anybody? So in some ways, it kind of, looking back, was a blessing, and maybe motivated me to do some things that otherwise I could have just taken the comfortable route and said, let's go to Michigan State, or, let's stay around home.
Did you keep this private? Like, did you know this and just go, I'm not going to tell anybody, maybe my dad, but I'm just going to...
My closest friends and family knew, but it wasn't something, that I would go and tell colleagues at work, or, I never wanted to be viewed as the sick guy. So it wasn't something that I talked about very often.
Let's take a break. You're watching Anything is Possible. What a story. More in a moment.
Coming up.
I'm not proud to say that when I started to finally get sick and feel the effects of the disease, and all the different things that it kind of did to my body, it does change then, and you start to kind of go to dark places and think, your mindset definitely shifts.
Anything is possible because it is. Tom Satkowiak is my guest. What a story. So you're you're finishing community college, another thing we have in common. I had to leave the college I was at because I didn't have enough money. And so I decided to clean up my first couple of years at a community college. And then I went back. So Midwest, I'm getting all of this now. So you're in community college and you find out you got liver disease and it's a ticking time bomb without a clock on it, right?
Yeah.
So you decide, you know what? If I could be here today and gone tomorrow, I might as well max out today.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to go for my dreams, the things that I've dreamed possible. You know, my basement PR department, my basement journalism needs to be brought up out of the basement into the light. And so you decide to go for it. How are you feeling? I mean, are you feeling like, some people say when they have a diagnosis, it does have a clarifying effect. In other words, you get to a place where you're like, I'm going to live. I mean, I don't know how much time I have to live, but I'm not going to spend that time thinking about dying. I'm going to think about living. Did it feel like I'm alive? I'm going for it.
It did. For a long time, it really did. And I think you learn to live kind of with that mindset, like, you know, let's go for it now. Let's take the nice vacation now while we can, because it just changes your perspective on a lot of things. And so certainly when before my health really started declining, that was kind of the attitude that I approached life with. I'm not proud to say that when I started to finally get sick and feel the effects of the disease and all the different things that it kind of did to my body, it does change then, and you start to kind of go to dark places and think, you know, your mindset definitely shifts. And so it's kind of a just mental and spiritual warfare, trying to kind of navigate that journey.
The dark places. That's hard. I know about the dark places, those days when I heard one person describe it this way. Fatigue makes cowards of all men. I think that's the quote. And you can be the happiest, most upbeat, most positive person, but we all have a certain amount of psychic and spiritual energy available on any given day. Everybody has a full battery, but if you got to do life, and that takes a certain amount of energy, and you've got relationships, and that takes a certain amount of energy. If you've burned out 2/3 of your battery, and then you're battling an illness on top of that, and that illness in and of itself takes a full battery. When you start working below the power capacity you have, and maybe you don't even know how to find power somewhere else, and it's relentless. It's like it doesn't let up. It's not getting better. It can, and especially, I know for me, and I think people who kind of grew up in that Midwestern thing, whether it's farming or factory work, they never want to be a burden to anybody else. Am I right on
Yes,
that?
absolutely.
You never want anybody carrying your water or doing your work for you. Shift workers don't like the thought of somebody having to cover for them because everybody in the factory talks about, why is Tom laying out, right? Farmers know, I can't lay out. That mentality, I live with it. So when you get to that point where you don't have the energy, you don't have the drive, you're coming up short, it's not what other people think of you as much as it is what you think of you. And when you start to think less of you, does any of that relate or resonate?
Oh, it resonates in a major way, particularly in the spring of 2018. That's when maybe my health, you could say, was at its worst, and I was really struggling. And I continued to go to work every day because that's kind of just all I knew. And it's, I was determined to, I felt like if I had to take time off work or if I had to take leave, it was like that first step toward the grave. And so I wanted to keep coming to work. But if I really look back during that spring, I think I was just kind of a shell. I was there. I don't know how effective I was. I was just trying to make it through, just enduring. So that part's hard to look back on. But things flipped and eventually got better. So,
suicide?
The thought entered my mind. More than entered my mind, I guess at times I kind of came up with a plan on how I could, just sort of solve all the problems and not create problems for Brooke. So I did have some thoughts about how I could do this and make it look like an accident, to where she could still have some benefit from me being gone, and very ashamed looking back that I kind of thought those things, and obviously very blessed and grateful that they were just thoughts.
I think there could be a lot of people watching that absolutely relate to everything that you're expressing right now. Like, there's so many people that really, they're at the end of their rope, and that they're at the limit of their personal agency or resources. And what's amazing is that when we get to that place, there are people who bring us possibility, right? That show up in our lives. Why don't we take a break here? This is going to be a 2-part story, so you got to stay for part 2, because wait until you hear what happens. The miracles upon miracles that happen for Tom. I think you're going to love this. We'll see you next time on Anything is Possible.